Okay. So, in the last lecture we saw one example and got an idea of how to sort of go about trying to solve the problem of small oscillations. Just to recap, what we are going to do now in this lecture is basically develop a general framework for solving this problem. Okay. And to do that, what I am going to do is first I will sort of summarize what we did in our first lecture, where we defined the problem. Okay. So, the small oscillations basically means that you have a system and there is a stable equilibrium, and if you take the stable equilibrium and very small deviations from the stable equilibrium, then of course, you get the linearized system, and the Lagrangian for which we wrote in our lecture as half of T I j eta I dot eta j dot and minus V I j eta I eta j. Out of this, eta I is the deviation of ith coordinate from the equilibrium position, and similarly eta I dot is corresponding velocity there, and V I j and T I j are found by approximating the original Hamiltonian, so that you only have numbers in T I j and V I j. So, basically there are no coordinates in T I j and V I j. Okay. Fine. Now, the equation of motion, we know how to do this. You take Lagrange's equation and use this Lagrangian, you get equation of motion, which is T I j eta j double dot and plus V I j eta j is equal to 0. Okay. And remember, there are n equations in this. These are linear differential equations of second order, but there are n of those because there is a free hanging index I there. For each I, there is one equation. Okay. Now, how do we solve this? So, to do that, first thing we did was to put these etas in a matrix form. In the matrix form, you get eta 1 to eta j, all these components are put here in a column matrix. V of course has a natural matrix form, which is n by n, and T also has a natural matrix form. And in terms of matrices, now we write down the Lagrangian as, so this is basically a row matrix because we have taken a transpose of this, and T times eta dot and minus eta transpose V eta, and from that we construct this matrix equation there. Okay. And this matrix equation is all that we want to solve. In the last lecture, when we looked at one example, we sort of talked about how we could decouple these equations, so that each one of these components, so by transforming it to new variables, each one of these equations would look like a simple harmonic equation. Okay. Fine. Now, the questions we would like is this. The first of all, in the last problem I defined something called as a normal mode. Normal mode is a particular solution in which in each coordinate there is a simple harmonic oscillation, but all the components vibrate with exactly the same frequency. So, your solution would be of the form eta, which is equal to A times cos omega t plus phi. Remember, eta is a column matrix with all the individual components, and A here will be a constant matrix, again column matrix, and that means all eta 1, eta 2, eta 3 and so on, they all have exactly same time dependence, but different amplitudes. So, A basically becomes a matrix of amplitudes, and this omega is now called as the frequency of the normal this particular normal mode. Okay. So, we actually found in the last example that there are two normal modes, there were 2 degrees of freedom and there were 2 normal modes. And just to remember the 2 normal modes were when the bobs moved away from each other, but of course, they were again having a same frequency, and the other variety was where the 2 bobs moved together in sync and in phase. Okay. Now, question that we would like to ask is this, is whether such normal modes exist as a solution of the original small oscillation problem, the equation of motion that we wrote, and if the normal modes exist, then what do we do with those. So, the claim that we are going to make is that this system of differential equations actually has n independent normal modes, and a general solution can be written as the linear sum of those normal modes. See, this makes everything lot easier, because the problem in that case boils down to finding the normal modes, and the moment you find the normal modes, any general solution can be written in terms of those normal modes. All that we have to do is basically you would have initial conditions, and corresponding to 2n initial conditions there would be 2n independent constants in these linear sum. All that we have to do is every time just find those constants, and then the solution is immediate. Okay. Now, this technique of course we have used in many different branches of physics. Okay. So, let me start by answering these questions. The first thing I will do is I will show that given a general solution, you can always write it in terms of the or write it as linear sum of the normal modes. Okay. So, let us start. Suppose, let me assume first of all that there are n linearly independent normal modes available, okay, and then I will write the general solution as the linear sum of all these solutions that are there. Okay. But remember, each one of these solutions is solution of original differential equation, which means each one of those eta i's obey this differential equation. Now, if I start with this and operate by t, then what do I get? When I operate by t on eta double dot, then I get t, then I will expand this eta, because it is linear sum and c's are constants. Eta double dot is nothing but sum over C I eta I double dot, which is what I have written here. And then because T of course is a matrix multiplication, it will distribute over this sum, and when it distributes over this sum, it will basically multiply the matrix eta I double dot. But we know from this equation that T operating on eta I double dot is nothing but minus V operating on eta I or multiplying eta I, and then you put that together and finally get minus V eta. So, basically this eta, which is linear sum of all these independent solutions, is also a solution of this differential equation. Okay. So, this basically completes the first part of the claim. Now, what will happen is this: how many are these n independent solutions enough to describe any general solution is the question, and that of course can also be easily answered, because there will be 2n unknowns in the in this sum. Basically, if you look at each eta has a form like this: A is already known, phi is one unknown, and when you take linear sum, there is a C I. So, basically there are 2n unknown constants in the general solution, and I have 2n initial conditions. So, once I have 2n equations connecting the initial conditions and C i's and phi i's, the answer is immediate. Okay? Fine. Now, the second part of the proof is to show that if I have, for example, these solutions, look at the equation of motion, that is T operating on eta double dot plus V eta is equal to 0, and when I substitute this eta back into this equation, all that happens is I get V into A. Remember, V is n by n matrix, A is your column matrix. So, V into A becomes equal to omega square T into A. And now look at this equation, this is very simple actually. V is a matrix which is known, T is a matrix which is known, A's are the variables which we have to find. Okay? and omega square as of now is not known. What does this tell you? This is basically similar to an eigenvalue equation. Okay. So, if I did not have t for example there, it would have simply become V a is equal to omega square times a, but that is the standard eigenvalue equation. Here now I have this extra matrix T there. Okay. Once I have this extra matrix T, this basically becomes what is called as a generalized eigenvalue problem, and here the in a very general way I will write it as A into x is basically lambda times B x. If B is identity, this becomes a standard eigenvalue problem. If B is not, then of course this is a generalized eigenvalue problem. Okay. And basically all that we need to do is find solutions to this generalized eigenvalue problem. Once we do that, we have complete solution to our problem. Okay. Okay. Let me look at the properties of this T and V matrix, which will help us in understanding how to solve this eigenvalue problem, because given any arbitrary matrix A and B in the generalized eigenvalue problem may not actually have a solution. Not all matrices are diagonalizable in that diagonalizable. Okay. So, in this particular case we still will have solutions, and that relates to the properties of the kinetic energy matrix and the potential energy matrix. So, look at these matrices there. First of all, both these matrices, they are symmetric. Okay. The definition itself immediately tells you that they are symmetric. Here basically in Tij you would have Mij as a coefficient of Qi dot Qj dot. You simply divide this into two parts and put one part in the lower part of the matrix, one part in the upper side of the matrix. Okay. That gives you T as a symmetric matrix, and V here is also a symmetric matrix. That is in fact very obvious from this definition. As long as V is sufficiently differentiable and continuous, I know that the order of partial derivatives can be changed, and this in fact is exactly same as partial derivative of V with respect to Qj and then Qi. Okay. Fine. So, V is also symmetric matrix. Now, something else that happens is basically the T matrix is a positive definite matrix. The definition of positive definite matrix is in fact this: for any vector eta, eta multiplied by or eta transpose matrix eta is greater than or equal to 0 for all etas, for all such column matrices, then you say that matrix is positive definite. And for kinetic energy we know that is true, because see, we are talking about small deviations from a stable equilibrium, and from the stable equilibrium the potential energy curve only goes up, and kinetic energy, which is in fact represented by this, is the difference between total energy and the potential energy graph, and that is always positive. So, we know that kinetic energy matrix is positive definite. Now, when will it be 0? If that is 0, then quite clearly your system is actually sitting on the equilibrium point. Okay? And if it is sitting on the equilibrium point with all velocities 0, then your kinetic energy would be 0, but that is of course a trivial problem to solve. So, we are not in fact considering that problem, we will be considering a problem where there actually is oscillation. So, kinetic energy matrix is positive definite. What happens to the potential energy matrix? That is also positive definite, because at Q0 I have a stable equilibrium. Now, look at for example a situation like this. In the stable equilibrium, the graph of the potential would look something like this, and there is the equilibrium point where the potential energy is minimum. Now, you take a vector in your parameter space, in your coordinate space, in any direction. If you take coordinate vector in any direction, what happens to the potential energy? Potential energy always increases, and remember the Taylor expansion of potential energy was V at q, that is this point is basically V at q 0 plus eta V I j into eta I into eta j, okay, and summed over I and j. That is basically this, that also must be always positive. So, what will happen is that V is also a positive definite matrix, but wait, we also have another category of potentials like this. Potentials like this, of course, we will call it as neutral equilibrium or some other words, indifferent equilibrium and so on. But here you can see that if you travel along, so in one direction the potential actually just does not change. So, so the second derivative of the potential in this direction is also 0. So, this is one case where the Vij matrix will not be positive definite, but what you can say surely say is it does not become negative, okay? And that is why in fact the word used here is semi positive definite matrix. That means this similar identity for V. So, eta transpose V eta is greater than or equal to 0 rather than strictly greater than 0. So, that is why it is a semi positive definite matrix. Okay. So, now once I have established this, now let us go back and try and solve that problem. So, here is first theorem. First theorem is that if A and B both, so I am referring to the now general eigenvalue problem which I wrote as A x is equal to lambda B x. The theorem says that if A and B are both symmetric and positive definite, then all eigenvalues are real and also positive. Okay. Fine. Let us go through the proof. Now, proof goes like this. First of all, the eigenvalues are given by determinant of A minus lambda B equal to 0. Okay. This is the characteristic equation for finding eigenvalues, and this of course will give you a polynomial. Okay. It will give you a polynomial of degree n. Now, what I am going to do is in the subsequent calculation, the first thing we do is we will assume that we are not really looking at the problem in real numbers, but look at the complex numbers. So, think of this problem as a problem of the complex matrices, but we know that A and B are symmetric, real and positive definite. So, if I get a polynomial of degree n, the set of complex numbers is algebraically closed. That means, I will definitely have n solutions to this characteristic equation. Not all of them will be real in general, but in this case they will be. So, you definitely get n solutions, and let us say lambda 1 to lambda n are the corresponding solutions, and for each lambda n I have a eigenvector x k. So, A operating on x k or A multiplying x k should give you lambda k, B multiplying x k. Okay. Take a Hermitian adjoint of this, because we are not assuming that lambda and x k are real. So, take a Hermitian adjoint. What you would get is basically Hermitian adjoint is complex conjugation and the transpose. So, when I take transpose, I will get x k dagger A is equal to lambda k star, because now we are not still assuming that lambda k is real, x k dagger B. And the trick to do is you multiply the first equation by x k dagger from the left and multiply the second equation by x k from the right. Now, look at what you will get. You will get x k dagger A x k here and x k dagger A x k here also. So, if you subtract these two equations, the left hand sides would cancel. On the right hand side also you get something similar, except that lambda k and lambda k star may not be equal. But then now we come to this here. So, 0 is equal to lambda k minus lambda k star, and then you have x k dagger B x k. and this is where the positive definiteness of B comes in. If B is positive definite, then this quantity is non-zero, that means lambda k minus lambda k star must be 0, and that means lambda k's must be the real numbers. Okay. Each of this lambda k. So, basically because A and B have this special nature, all eigenvalues, n eigenvalues, they are all real, and you can immediately show that they are positive, because what is lambda k? Lambda k now we know is basically nothing but x k dagger A x k divided by this, and if you look at, so basically you can now add the two equations and that would give you identity like this, and numerator and denominator both are positive definite, and if they are positive definite, then of course lambda k will be positive. Okay. So, this completes the part. So, not only you have n solutions to the original eigenvalue problem, but the all eigenvalues are real. Okay. And in addition, what happens is that the eigenvectors, they are orthogonal to each other with respect to a metric or matrix B. Okay. What that means is I can always choose this x k matrices or the eigenvector matrices, they will obey identity like this. Now, this is of course not difficult to see why we are calling them as orthogonal. If B was an identity matrix, then this looks like x dagger k x l is delta k l, but that is exactly what orthogonality stands for. Now, here I have B matrix in between, and that is why the word that I am or phrase that I am using is orthogonal with respect to B metric. Okay. Fine. This is also very easy to see. I mean, I have already looked at the part of the derivation in the last theorem. Do the same steps, come to this point. Once you come to this point, now let me say that if we are talking about non-degenerate situation where lambda k and lambda l are not equal to each other, or in other words all eigenvalues are different from distinct from each other, then this will not be 0. In that case x l b x k, this must be 0. Okay. And then, so that immediately establishes that if lambda k is not equal to lambda l, I can always choose, or I can the two eigenvectors obey this condition there. Okay. And what happens when k is equal to l? When k is equal to l, then I know that this is 0. I can always choose x k by scaling x k in such a way that I get normalized eigenvector. Okay. And then I can write this identity which I have written here. So, this completes our proof. The original equation for a small oscillation problem has solutions, n independent solutions, and the general solution can be written in terms of the. So, here the idea that I introduced in the last problem about diagonalizing using a U matrix, here that U matrix or diagonalizing matrix basically is P, and how do I obtain that P matrix? I have got this x 1 to x n eigenvectors, put them in columns of the P matrix. And what does this P matrix do? So, there are two of them, A x is equal to lambda B x. What does this P matrix do? By similarity transformation, this P matrix basically will diagonalize B matrix to identity. Remember, this is the orthogonality condition, and P simultaneously diagonalizes A to D matrix whose diagonal elements are lambda 1 to lambda n, and it is a diagonal matrix. Okay. So, this is basically exactly same as the entire procedure is diagonalization by a P matrix which is orthogonal set, but with respect to B matrix there. Okay. Fine. So, now having described all this, I will just write down the steps that we should take to solve so it is basically the problem of small oscillations boils down to a procedure. You just go through the procedure and you get the solutions. There are no tricks involved here. So, the steps are, you first of course look at the problem, write down the Lagrangian, identify your kinetic energy matrix by ignoring all the dependence on individual coordinates. So, qi to q1 to qn, you ignore them or replace them by the equilibrium values, okay? Not the velocities, remember, you have to keep the velocities as they are. Then find V matrix by doing a Taylor expansion. Then you find the eigen energies or eigen frequencies omega I. Now, of course, omega I square appears in the eigenvalue equation, remember, but once I have omega I square, I can of course take a square root. So, solve this characteristic equation, which is determinant of V minus omega square t equal to 0, get your eigen frequencies, then get eigen vectors a I, and then you write the general solution in terms of, so eta as a function of t will be equal to C I, a i's are completely known, and then you have this time dependence which is harmonic, okay. And finally, I need to determine C i's and phi i's. There are two unknowns there still, and those two unknowns can be obtained by looking at the initial conditions at t is equal to 0. We know the initial values of the coordinates and we know initial velocities. Okay. So, once we know that, this is done. So, you see the entire program of small oscillation problems is is like a procedure, it is a mechanical procedure, you can come to the answer very quickly. Let me start by looking at one example. So, here is one example where we use this kind of small oscillation behavior very often, and they are of course easy to see also, because in spectroscopy experiments you can very easily see the vibrational modes of the molecules. So, I will consider only one example of molecule which is called as linear molecule. Typically, think of a molecule like CO2, where the molecule looks like this. There are these, so two oxygens would be sitting and carbon would be in the middle of them, and this is a linear molecule. So, they are basically in one single line, unlike H2O, for example. H2O is not a linear molecule. So, the two bonds actually make angle which is different from pi, but not in this case. In CO2 you have a linear molecule. Okay. Now, the vibrational modes, of course, here there could be other vibrational modes too. I am just going to consider linear longitudinal modes, where these particles can move only along the line of the molecule. Okay. Fine. And typically, how do you make this spring approximation? For the molecules of this kind, the potential typically is described by what is called as the Lennard-Jones potential, something similar to van der Waals, but van der Waals typically is used for inert molecules, inert atoms, but here the Lennard-Jones potential is basically 1 over r to the power 12 minus 1 over r to the power 6 kind of potential. You can quickly calculate the equilibrium, and you can calculate spring constant by taking second derivative of potential. Okay. So, this will work for one pair. So, for example, between oxygen and carbon, experimentally we can get this factor, the constants A and B, and then we know what that spring constant would be. Okay. Fine. So, the problem now becomes that of a molecule with springs attaching the different atoms there. Now, let us start solving this problem. Now, x1, x2, x3. So, basically this is going to be on the single line, real line. So, x1, x2, x3 be the coordinates of the 3 atoms, and the natural length, let us say, is b, that is basically would be equal to r naught here. So, the natural length of the springs is B, that would be same as I will write the equilibrium positions as x 0. So, x 02 minus x 01 is equal to B, and x 03 minus x 02 equal to B. This is your equilibrium configuration, but you can immediately start looking at this problem, and you know that there are 3 degrees of freedom, but you see this equilibrium constraint immediately tells you that if I keep my middle molecule at some point and the remaining 2 on the side at the distance of B, I have equilibrium. But now this entire molecule can be moved along x axis, I mean along the line, and you still have equilibrium, same energy, same potential energy. So, this was similar to the neutral equilibrium that I told you earlier. So, what will happen in this case is the potential energy matrix will not be positive definite, it will be semi positive definite. One of the eigenvalues or even more could be 0. Okay. All right. So, I will actually solve this problem, and then we will look at the solutions and see how that problem of 0 eigenvalue gets resolved and what does that mean. Okay. Define eta i's as the displacement from some equilibrium position. Okay. So, we will fix that. Now, write down the potential energy here. Now, we have already in fact made the approximation to the potential of Lennard-Jones and already come to a spring kind of potential. So, the potential now will become half k eta 1 square plus 2 eta 2 square plus eta 3 square, and then there is a minus 2 eta 1 eta 2 and minus 2 eta 2 eta 1. Okay. Put this in matrix form. How would this look like in matrix form? So, the 3 diagonal entries will be 1 2 1. This eta 1 eta 2 I should split it into 2 parts, write it as eta 1 eta 2 plus eta 2 eta 1. So, that your V matrix looks symmetric, that is how it would look like. So, that minus 2 gets divided over 2 sides here, minus k here and minus k here, and then the diagonal entries are and this entry of course is k there. All right. What about the kinetic energy matrix? That is very simple to write. So, this is basically that one is basically half m eta 1 dot square plus eta 3 dot square and plus half this capital M is the mass of the middle atom and eta 2 dot square. Okay. This of course will look like M capital M small m. It is a diagonal matrix. All right. So, let us go ahead and start calculating the eigen frequencies. So, the frequencies of the normal modes will be, I have to solve this polynomial equation in omega square. It is a cubic polynomial, but the solutions are straightforward. Okay. Calculate these, they come to one of the eigenvalue is 0, the other one is k by m. So, omega 2 is square root of that, and the third one is k by m 1 plus 2 m by m. Okay. This is basically solving the cubic polynomial there. Calculate corresponding eigenvectors. They come to, for this one it is 1 1 1, and for these two it is 1 0 minus 1 and it is 1 minus 2 m 1. Now, these are basically same as those A matrices, right, in the first equation. Now, if you look at these, I have not normalized them in that sense. Okay. I have left them in unnormalized form, but that is okay, because remember for each one of them when I write the general solution there will be C I multiplying. So, once I have the C I multiplying, that also can be merged with the normalization constant there. Okay. Now, at least for these two solutions I know what the solution look like. Eta 2 will be xi 2 cos omega 2 t plus phi 2, okay, and eta 3 t will be xi 3, that is that one, into cos of omega 3 into t. What about this solution here? This solution, remember, omega is 0. If omega is 0, what does that mean? That means eta, I have to go back now to the original problem there. Original problem tells me that eta 1 double dot must be equal to 0, and if eta 1 double dot is 0, then I would expect the solution to be this xi 1 into some function of t, okay. And if you just solve this by putting f t into this one, then you get xi 1 into a t plus b, that is of course very simple. Eta 1 double dot is 0. So, the solution f double dot also will be 0, and f must be of the form of a line a t plus b. And what does this mean? This means all 3 molecules simultaneously. So, in the so normal mode of vibrations are when the system is only in this one. What happens in that case? The 3 molecules or 3 atoms in the molecule, they travelling at a uniform speed along the line, okay, without distortion. So, this is basically motion of center of mass. The center of mass keeps moving with uniform speed, and you can see the remaining 2 solutions, the center of mass of course remains at 0 speed. So, in general, when you have system like this, the small oscillation problem, one of them would describe the motion of center of mass, and the remaining 2 are of course the vibrational modes or oscillation modes there. Now, we know how this eta 1 works. Now, you can look at the motion of these 2, and that of course, if you look at the motion into the 2 modes here are exactly this. So, in one of the modes, remember the middle in xi 2, the motion of the central particle is in fact 0, it does not move at all from its own position, just the 2 side atoms, they keep oscillating, they are out of phase. So, they go away from each other and they come together, and that is one of the modes. And in the other mode, the side 2 blue balls, they are moving in sync, in phase with the same frequency, but the middle one is actually going opposite. So, one it is 180 degree out of sync with the blue balls. And what happens in that case? Remember, the middle one has a different mass. So, the net center of mass in this motion also will remain at x 2 all the time. Okay. So, this is example where we can see what happens when we have 0 eigenvalue. In 0 eigenvalue typically would mean the motion of center of mass with some uniform speed, okay, if there are no external forces. All right. So, in the next class I will look at few more examples, and then we will close this discussion.